Over to you, David.
Thanks, Teresa. So today we're talking about the Approved Provider application, really going over an overview and highlighting some of the pitfalls that people have had when they've made their application and had queries come back from the department. My name's David Cox and I work with Ansell Strategic. I'm called the Partner of Operational Strategy, which means that we help organisations with operational planning. So we go through with home care providers around their systems, their processes and helping them with compliance. So it's a really exciting stage because there's so much happening in the home care space. When we actually look at home care as a really quick overview, most of you would know that there's about 875,000 residents or Australians that currently receive home care services, and there's about 1,450 home care providers. So it's a fairly big business. 18% of those providers are government. There's around about 69% of them are currently not-for-profit, and around about 13% are for-profit providers. That's certainly expected to change as home care reform goes through. So what is home care services? Again, as you probably already appreciate, it's really around those personal care elements, a little bit different from the traditional HAC or CHSP providers, where it is actually giving actual care delivery. It is also breaching into that HAC and CHSP environment around the provision of domestic services as well. So in 2014-2015, there was around about $2.8 billion of funding that actually went into home care provision, and that's soon to escalate. Now it's going to escalate because our profile of care recipients is changing, and certainly the profile is moving towards home care away from residential aged care. The reason for that is that our population is exploding. As you can kind of see on the graph, when we hit 2022, we have this huge number of residents or care recipients over the age of 75 that will be seeking care services. So we have to accommodate that somehow, and the only way that we can really do it is by providing home care services. The reason for that is that we're not going to be able to sustain our current system. So at the moment, there's currently 1 in every 5 retired Australian has a taxpayer funding them. That's going to change as we head into the future, because we're certainly not going to have the same amount of people that are going to be paying taxes to afford residential care or home care. So we have the government has to think of clever ways to actually counteract that. The Living Longer, Living Better reform has come about since around about 2013, and it's really come as a result of consumer expectations, probably more realistically around affordability, and the government acknowledges that they're just not going to be able to afford aged care going into the future. A lot of the reform that's going through at the moment is to make it an affordable system as we move forward into the future. When we look at home care, really around about giving the choice back to the consumer, making it consumer-directed care, but in giving that choice, it's also giving responsibility to the consumer. Responsibility means the consumer pays for that care. So there's been a lot of effort put towards actually getting the onus onto the consumer and getting the consumer to bear the cost of that onus. So as we move beyond 2016, you'll see in February 2017 there's the deregulation of home care supply. So their allocated places are going to move from the provider to the consumer. Now, consumers will still have to go through an approval process to get that care, but then they'll be free to choose who the provider will be of those care services. It means that it opens up great opportunities for new home care providers. Now, in the future, funding will also merge with residential aged care. But in 2018, there flags up that home care provision and traditional HAC provision, which will move to the Commonwealth Home Support Program, will mix or will blend. So providers of HAC and home care will be funded the same. As we move beyond 2018, then that funding pool will also merge with residential aged care. So people seeking residential aged care, traditional HAC or CHSB and home care will all be funded under the same pool. So this is the same process that New Zealand went through around about 10 years ago. So we actually look closely at their models because we look at, we've seen some really interesting progression as New Zealand have moved through their legislative environment. One of the things that we noticed with that environment is that the provision of residential care, home care and other services all blended together. So where we now operate in Australia in very, very different jam jars. So we have the jam jar that is residential care, we have the jam jar for at-home services, and then we have the jam jar for disability services and private or fee services. In New Zealand, we've actually seen those jam jars break and the provision of services have all blended together. This is really where we see it moving into beyond 2017. We've actually already seen it with people applying to be providers of home care services, and people that have actually come across our office and asked for assistance to provide to make the application have been wide and varied. So traditionally we've seen the home care or residential care providers wanting to go into home care. Then we've actually seen the HAC providers wanting to go into home care. We're now more and more seeing private fee-for-service providers actually wanting to go into home care as well. So people that have been private agencies, whether it be nursing or domestic agencies, and providers of commercial catering, commercial domestic services and the like, are all now trying to get into this big bundle of HAC funding. So that worries us a little bit. It's great because it gives diversity to care recipients, but it worries us a little bit because there's a whole lot of process behind the scenes with any Commonwealth funded model that people might not appreciate. So with new entrants means there's increased competition, which is putting pressure on existing providers, but it also means the consumer's got a whole lot more choice, which is a really positive thing. In response to that, we're seeing a really, really big focus on the differentiation of products. So home care providers, especially new home care providers, are offering different products, which is great. It's giving great consumer choice. But it means that new entrants to the market have to really, really have an understanding of the services they're going to provide and how they're going to market those services. It's very much consumer driven. So it's not going to be like the olden days, which is now, where you just say that you're going to open shop and you're going to get referred clients. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to actually go out there and aggressively seek clients. One of the things that we've really, really noticed is that already there's a really big focus on cost. So people are aggressively campaigning or marketing the cost of their administration and their travel services and trying to drive that administrative cost down. Now that gives a really big opportunity for smaller, more nimble, less traditional providers of aged care or home care the opportunity to differentiate themselves by cost. There's lots and lots of home care providers that are out there that are fairly large, they're fairly cumbersome, and they've always relied on block funding. So they've not had to worry about the cost of their admin services. Now they have to budget for that, they have to tell the client what their admin service is, and now they're having to really focus on cost containment to make sure that admin cost is not too much for the consumer to bear. So it's really changing the market around, and again, it's for new entrants, it's really getting them to focus on how they're actually going to service that client, but then how they're going to charge for administrative costs. So we've helped a number of groups, including AXWA and the Property Council, in actually delivering home care service options. We give advice around how people are going to run their services when they actually start up. Now, the application process is the very, very beginning of setting up the system, because we're finding that people are actually coming in and thinking that they will actually provide their existing services, just get funded for those existing services under a home care budget. Now that's not actually the case, predominantly because although we're saying it's a deregulated market, it's really not. It's still a highly regulated market, and it's regulated by a Commonwealth body. And that Commonwealth body is having really high demands around how you're actually going to deliver that service. But in the approved provider application, they're really wanting evidence of how you're actually going to fit in with their model, not how you provide your existing model. And this is where a lot of providers or potential providers have become unstuck and been rejected in their application, because it's really the Commonwealth seeking you to demonstrate to them how you fit in with their system. And that's a pretty hard thing to do under a highly regulated market. So let's look at the application. The application looks long and onerous, and it is. It is a really complicated document, and that's a deliberate move by the Commonwealth. Again, they want to see that you can fit in with their system, not the other way around. Now, who is an approved provider? A lot of applicants have thought that the approved provider is actually an individual. It's actually the organisation, not the individual. It's the organisation who is eligible to be funded to provide the care. So the approved provider is responsible for all the decisions around the delivery of care and finances. So when you're actually demonstrating your capability in the application, you're really demonstrating your ability to deliver care and take financial responsibility. The approved provider has a whole lot of responsibilities and obligations under the Act, the associated principles relating to the Act, and the Home Care Common Standard. And so any application has to keep referring to the Act, the principles and the standards. You see this is a fairly common thing. Now what's really common and where people get tripped up as well is that they feel that the process or the relationship with the Department of Health is a collaborative process. It's not a collaborative process at all. What the department is doing is giving its responsibility to the approved provider. That means that the approved provider has to take that responsibility and demonstrate that it can comply with that responsibility. So a lot of applications say things like they will establish a collaborative relationship with the department, they'll seek advice from the department, and they really try to demonstrate that they're going to be relating to the department. The department doesn't want that. The department wants to give the responsibility to the approved provider, and then the approved provider take all of that responsibility. It's not the department's role to tell you how to do things. Its role is to tell you when you do things wrong. It's a very strange relationship. And so everything in your application is really demonstrating your capability, not your reliance on the department or a third party. It's a very strange relationship. So in your application there are lots of questions around key personnel, and again people have got a little bit tripped up about who they put up as key personnel. So key personnel is anyone that's responsible for key organisational, clinical or financial decisions. That includes every owner, every director or every board member. So even if those board members don't have an active role in the day-to-day process, they are counted as key personnel and they have to demonstrate an understanding of the home care environment. If any executive, any manager of care or people that have major roles in policy formation or the formation of processes around care. It's also any financial decision maker or anyone that has primary access to care recipients' funds or budgets. So that can be a fair few people. We're finding that a lot of people are actually putting in human resource managers, people around quality, and those staff don't actually need to be included. And we try to recommend that people minimise who's key personnel, primarily because it decreases your workload, but it does actually have to include those financial, clinical and organisational decision makers. We'll talk a little bit more about key personnel in a tick. So let's have a look at the forms. There's a couple of forms. If you are a new provider, you fill in what's called Form A. and you must fill out Schedule A for every key personnel. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on. If you're an existing provider of residential aged care or another type of care, then you fill out what's called Form B. And we're assuming that we're going to fill out now Form A because most people that have come through our office with inquiries are new providers, so new entrants into the home care market. So there are a number of types of care when you fill out Form A that you can offer your services. And it's really important to highlight that the applications change markedly for the different types of care that you're providing. So when you're actually going in and offering home care, you're offering domestic style care and care and clinical services into a resident's own home. So these are a permanent or a semi-permanent package that's funded on a semi-permanent or permanent basis. You then can have the option of offering flexible care. We've had lots of people coming across saying, yes, I want to provide home care, I want to provide flexible care, but they're treating home care and flexible care as the same thing. Flexible care is very, very different. So flexible care is generally short-term unless it's in an unusual arrangement. And that unusual arrangement is really providing culturally specific care to people that are either Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and that's generally in a remote location. It's providing some other remote location care or a multi-purpose service in, again, a remote location. So it's generally a hospital that's providing aged care services as well as acute care services. So if you're located in a metro area and you're looking to provide flexible care, you're really limited to two things. The first one is transition care. Transition care is time limited, so it's short-term, goal-orientated care, which means that you're actually transitioning someone from an acute episode or acute care and providing intensive care to get them to a goal. So that goal might be to get to home or to get to a status where they're stable enough that they go to residential aged care. Now that's provided in the home and it's generally providing care, clinical and therapy services. If you haven't got the capability to provide clinical and therapy services, there's not a lot of point in actually applying to be a transitional care provider. It's the same for the next category, which is called short-term restorative care. So short-term restorative care can occur in an institution or it can happen in the resident's own home. Again, this is short-term and it's typically care, clinical and therapy services that are aimed to actually make somebody independent. So transition care is transitioning them from one place to another. Restorative care is intensive care, generally following an acute illness, but generally the care recipient is in their own home and you're aiming to get them to a goal. That goal is usually that they stay in their own home and they recover from that acute illness. So again, if you haven't got that capacity in terms of care, clinical and therapy services, we don't think there's a lot of point actually applying to flexible care unless you're actually going to say that you're going out to get that capacity. The third thing that you can apply for is residential aged care. Residential aged care is very different to home care in that it's expensive and there's really, really significant capital resource requirement. So you're going to have to demonstrate to the government that you have the capability to either build or buy a residential aged care facility. And so the financial reporting around that is significantly different to home care services. So again, if you haven't got the capability to go out and take out a loan for $30 million or plus to buy a residential aged care facility, then we suggest that you don't actually put an application in for residential care. Focus on those core services around home care that you have the capability for. So they're the types of care and the types of applications. And when you actually make an application under Form A, the department is really looking for a few key things Now these key things need to be demonstrated in all of your questions, and they become very repetitive in your responses, but these are the things that the department are looking for. They're looking for your demonstrated experience. Now you've never been a home care provider, so the department know that you're not going to have experience providing home care. So you're going to look for your demonstrated experience in an associated or related field. So if you're a HAC provider, you're going to demonstrate your experience in the provision of HAC or CHSP services and how that's going to relate to home care services. So they want you to acknowledge that the services you're providing are going to be different to home care and that you're actually going to make change to actually provide home care services. They see home care services as being infinitely different to every other service. They want you to acknowledge that that's different. They want you to demonstrate that there's capacity to actually undertake home care services. Now, capacity is not just around having the carers to provide the services, it's capacity around systems. So you've got those systems in place around policies and procedures and governance and risk and all those sorts of things that we'll talk about in a little bit. And it's actually demonstrating your capacity to move from the service that you're providing currently into a home care service. It's also that they want you to show an understanding of legislative framework, not that you comply with the legislation at the moment, but you understand the legislation. So it's actually going through and demonstrating that you're going to put in these systems that's going to make you a home care provider. And those systems, having an understanding of those systems around IT, how you're going to document your care provision, how you're going to document risk and all those sorts of things, aren't things that you're necessarily going to have now, but they want you to demonstrate an understanding of what you can embark on this. They also want you to commit to resourcing. So they want you to say, yes, this is going to involve more resourcing, and that resourcing is going to be around staff, around processes, and around systems. And they want you to see that you understand that and that you're going to commit to it. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So when when the department want to see demonstrated experience, they want to see that the key personnel have experience in some sort of care services. Now those care services aren't going to be home care services, but they might be in the provision of staff to hospitals if you're an agency. They might be in the provision of domestic services, and then you demonstrate that yes, we provide domestic services, but now we understand that we have to embark on a new project, and that project is going to be around the provision of care. What's very, very fundamental in the consumer-directed care environment is that you have to demonstrate that you have some engagement with consumers or care recipients, the department call them. So you actually have to demonstrate that you're not actually providing hours to someone, you're providing a service to someone, and you have to demonstrate that that service is consumer-directed and that you're engaging with them on a regular basis. You have to demonstrate that your key personnel have some understanding of quality processes, that someone there has an understanding and skills and capability around financial management, and that you have key personnel that understand what governance is. The governance is around risk, it's around clinical governance or care governance, it's around quality, and it's around financial. So you've got systems in place and people with the understanding that these systems have to be in a formal framework. As I say, the key personnel don't have to have worked in aged care. In fact, it's quite normal for your key personnel not to have worked in aged care. But they have to be able to apply their experiences in their own field to the home care setting. So, for example, when I actually applied to become key personnel, I was in biotechnology. So I'd never worked in aged care before, but I had to try and relate my experiences to how that would work in a home care or residential aged care environment. Experiences have to be related to key department triggers. The department have a big tick list that they go through, and it is around consumer-directed care. So everything has to be focused towards the consumer or the care recipient, not you and your systems. It has to be how your quality or your systems focus towards that consumer, and about how you're actually going to put some risk management strategies in place. Now, the department see that there are two key stakeholders in the provision of aged care. Those two key stakeholders are the consumer, so the care recipient, and the department. They don't care about you as a provider. What they want to see is that you have the systems, you have the processes in place to make sure that the department is off the hook and that the consumer is protected. So your application will focus everything to protecting that consumer. The department also want to be assured that you have the financial capability and that your key personnel have the experience to actually provide a financially sustainable model. They don't want to hear about your profit. They don't want to hear about how you drive your performance around profit. They want to hear that you actually have a model that's actually going to protect the consumer and in doing so be sustainable. So you'll very quickly learn in the application that it's not about you, it's about other people. So when we actually look at the legislative framework, the department's really looking to see that you know the Act, but you're not copying the Act. We have a lot of potential people applying to be approved providers that when they say, tell us about the aged care standards, they cut and copy and paste the standards into the application. The department know what the standards are. They want to see how you apply those standards to your practices. So they want to see how you're actually going to demonstrate your understanding to do that. They want you to align your goals with the department. So I know that in reality, your goals might be around your mission, if you're a mission-based organisation, or around profit. But they don't want to hear that. They want to hear that your goals align with the department. And again, those department goals are around the delivery of consumer-directed care, around risk aversion, and around quality. So all of your goals have to be targeted towards that in your home care program. I want you to recognise the Act, and so in your application they want you to keep referring to the Act. And so a lot of questions will say, in accordance with the quality standards, we do this and this and this. Again, it's not copying and pasting, it's referring and then applying that to your own process. They want you to speak department as well. So when you're actually talking about things, you have to keep referring to the Act, the standards, and using their terminology. So when you're talking about standards, it's not around your standards that you use at the moment, or it is. It's around using your standards but applying that to the department framework. So you go through and start referring to the common care standards and using their terminology when you speak to demonstrate that you're actually using their systems. So for example, you might have a continuous improvement system and in there there's elements around risk. But then the department call it a risk management process. And so you'll actually start talking about having a formal risk management process and how you go about that. You probably have that process in place. It's probably informal. The department want you to formalise it and to use the language. So they want you to see systems in place. The reason for that is that you're actually not going to be the person that's providing care. You're going to have people going out and providing care or domestic services in a fairly unsupervised environment. So they, from a risk management point of view, see that you've got systems in place that provides quality care, that the care is focused towards the care recipient, that the care recipient has an opportunity to provide input into their care and processes, and that there's processes in place that mitigate risk to the care recipient and to the department. They also have to have systems in place around finances. Now, probably the best way to demonstrate that is to show that there are policies and procedures in place. And this is an organisation that I help run, so I can stick it in. But they want you to see that in looking at home care that you have processes around each of the key standards and each of those triggers, and they tell you what those triggers are because they ask you questions around governance. So if there's questions in there around governance, then you have to demonstrate that you've got policies, processes, and procedures around governance. So you have to have strategy, you have to have mission, you have to have quality, you have to have processes around information management, all the way through the common standards. Now you have to have those in place before you actually, or an understanding of what you're going to have in place before you write your response. You can't write your response off the cuff. It really has to be measured. So you have to sit down and say, well, how are we going to manage staff when they're actually going out into the field? And in doing that, you really have to have an understanding of really that process that you're going to take. You might not write the formal processes and policies in place, but you have to have a framework of how you're actually going to do it, because you really have to respond to that in this application. Now, a lot of providers are saying, well, this is how we do it now, and that's great, but you have to apply it to again how you're going to do it under a home care framework. So you're going to say repeatedly in your application, we will have new policies, we'll have new systems, and we'll have new processes to capture what's required under the home care environment. We'll talk about those systems a little bit more, and there's some key systems. Really, the biggest one is around governance. You have to document who is going to protect care recipients and how they're going to be protected. So who's going to supervise the staff? How are your care recipients going to be protected from a legal point of view? So what agreements are you going to have in place that protects care recipients' rights? Who's going to audit the care? Who's going to go and give care recipients input into the care? And how are you going to capture that? Is that going to be through informal catch-ups with care recipients? Is it going to be through surveying care recipients? Going to be through an audit process, or is it going to be through a care recipient giving input at the end of their shift or during case planning session? How are you going to ensure the care is delivered as you promise it will be? So you're going to have to demonstrate in your application how you actually are going to give that care, but then how you're going to make sure that care is going to be delivered. How are you going to document your care delivery? You really have to demonstrate to the department how you're going to capture this. Now, you might not have an electronic care system in place, but now is the time to be considering, well, how are we going to do it? You can't just go out there and use your existing systems, because your existing systems won't be targeted towards common care standards. You're going to have to investigate a system, and it can be paper-based, it can be electronic, it can be whatever, but you have to say that we're going to put in a system that is going to address all of the elements of the common care standards. So it's going to be consumer directed, that care planning is going to involve the care recipient and their representative, and that, that you're going to go through when you're planning care and tick off all of those common care standards. That means you're going to involve the community, you're going to involve other parties, so you're going to involve other care providers. You really have to have an understanding of how you're actually going to do that before you make this application. The other thing that's very big with the department is ensuring that the care recipient's funds, which are really the department's funds, are protected. So the Act actually legislates some very specific things around that that we're going to talk about in a minute. And they're wanting to see that you've got that governance framework in place to make sure that's protected. And typically that's around who your key personnel are going to be and their experiences, but also around your financial systems. What mechanisms are in place to make sure that funds are protected? So who's going to be accessing residents' funds? Who's going to be making budgets with care recipients? And how are those funds going to be refunded if they're paid in advance and there's an excess in the resident's budget when they're discharged from your service? All these things that you have to think about. The standards are absolutely fundamental, and they really should, your quality system or your policies and procedures really have to relate to the common standards, because these common standards are what you're going to be assessed on when you have assessors knocking on your door on a regular basis. So your application for care should be referring to the common standards all the way through. So when they're talking about governance, there is a common home care standard for governance, but you're going to say our governance is going to cover information management. It's going to cover how we engage with community. It's going to cover how we deal with continuous improvement. So you're actually going through those standards in everything that you do and repeating yourself over and over and again to reinforce that there's an understanding that these standards run through everything that you're going to do. Now the application has word limits. So you're not going to be able to do this at length, but you're going to say, we have a process around staff supervision. And that's really all you're going to say. You have a process around the allocation of physical resources. And so you're actually referring to the standards, but then saying that you actually have systems in place to deal with that. The tricky thing to do is to put the words in, but not go over that word limit. Very, very key to the process is your human resources. Now, the provision of care services, as you well understand, is really about staff. Now, staff from a key personnel point of view, it's executives, it's managers, so head office staff in terms of your scheduling, your case coordinators if you're going to use case coordinators, and then your staff on the field. So you need to mention things around recruitment and selection. Now that might be that you're just saying that we're going to recruit appropriately qualified, appropriately experienced and appropriately skilled staff. But then you're also going to target specific things around the collection of police clearances and making sure that you have strategies in place to make sure that care recipients are safe. You're then going to talk about how safety is key, and that's going to be reinforced in orientation, ongoing education and supervision of staff. So you're going to use normal processes that you have in place, but then relating that to those key triggers that are really important to the department around making individual care, around risk aversion, and around managing those standards. Performance management is really important, and then you'll talk briefly around how you're actually going to schedule your staff to the needs of the care recipient. And again, it's not around efficiency from your point of view, but it's around meeting the needs and the timeframes of the care recipient, but doing that in an efficient manner so that you maximise the value of the care recipient's funds. So again, the department sees these funds as their money, and they want you to say that you're going to be really careful about how you manage that money. So that money is going to be spent wherever possible on the delivery of care, and that you're going to put systems in place to minimise the waste around scheduling, around case management, around admin fees and around travel fees. Then they're going to ask around your financial system. So what's your financial capability? Now, as I've said before, it's really around the efficient allocation of resources. So it's all around reducing client costs, not about increasing your profit. Now, I know that you're a not-for-profit, but in our applications from a lot of not-for-profits, they've sort of said that we're going to maximise our return. It's really not something that the department is interested in. The department is really interested in reducing that cost for the client, so maximising the dollar that the government is actually handing over to you or to the client. Again, it's around about having systems in place around governance, and it's really meeting those consumer-directed care requirements around budgeting. So a lot of your responses around financial systems is that you've got a system in place to give the opportunity for the care recipient to sit down and go through a budgeting process. But that budget will be done on a regular basis, and the budget will be modified according to the care recipient's needs. So if the care recipient's needs change, then your budgeting process will change as well. It's also around, you'll have to state that you will actually give that budget to the care recipient. It's absolutely fundamental to CDC requirements. So you have to say that you're going to have a system in place that's going to budget appropriately, that the budget is accurate, and the budget will be given to the care recipient. Now that budget will be given to the care recipient on engagement, so when they actually enter an agreement with your service, and every time there's a change. Now under the CDC requirements, you actually have to produce what's called a CDC statement. And so you actually have to say that we will put in a system, if you don't have one already, that will produce a CDC statement for the care recipient. So the care recipient every month will receive a financial statement of the funds that they've got allocated to them, the funds that have been used, and the funds that are in excess. You also have to demonstrate that you have a system in place to manage excess funds. So everyone will have a surplus fund, and the government will see that surplus fund as their money. So you have to specifically mention that you actually have a system in place to manage surplus funds and the refund of surplus funds when the care recipient is discharged from the service. So these are fundamental triggers that the department are looking at when you talk about your financial systems and financial processes. Now they don't tell you that you're meant to mention them, they just assume that if you read the Act that they're things that they focus on. Now when we actually talk about the key personnel, key personnel is a separate application, and separate application for really deliberate purpose. A separate application because it needs to be written by the key personnel themselves, not replicated from a master draft. We see a lot of people that have sent draft applications to us that have the same responses copied for each key personnel, and they're usually copied from the Form A. But it's not what the department is asking. The department is asking that key personnel to actually relate their personal and professional experiences to the home care setting. And we find that financial controllers or people that work in quality roles have a lot of difficulty doing that. But what you're actually doing is relating your personal skills. If you are an accountant, you're getting those personal skills and relating them to the home care setting. And it's perfectly okay to say, I do not deliver direct care services, but then you relate your job role to care services. So if you're an accountant, you would say, I understand the process of budgeting, I understand the process of appropriate resource allocation, so I'll make sure that the care staff have enough time and physical resources to conduct their job to meet the needs of the care recipient. So it's actually relating what you do to the end product or to the end consumer. And it's really hard, but you have to try and do it. We recommend that people fill out Form A before they actually fill out the key personnel, so that you as an organisation have sat down, you worked out your policies and procedures and your process, and then you communicate that to your key personnel so that they can then relate that in their responses. Again, they don't copy it, but they relate what you're actually going to do to their experiences. So for a key personnel that has never provided care services, again, it's perfectly okay for that key personnel to say, I haven't delivered care services, but I know that we have a suite of policies and procedures, and one of those policies and procedures relate to governance. And I understand that under that policy, that my obligations as a key personnel is to do this and this and this and this. So again, it's all relating back to this fundamental framework of a common understanding that the organisation has. So that's the tips of the trade for key personnel. It's perfectly normal for key personnel to write differently, that the language is different. In fact, that's what the department looks for. So they want to see that the application is original, that it's not actually copied from a template. So it's not cutting and pasting again, it's actually taking your personal experiences and applying that to that setting. And again, it's perfectly okay for you to say, I haven't had that experience before. So the take-home tips for people that are seeking to become approved providers. The number one take-home point is understand what your home care business is going to be and how you're going to run it before you actually make that application. Again, we have a lot of people coming across with draft applications, and they are just saying we're going to become providers of home care. But they don't know what home care services they're going to apply and how that's going to apply to their existing business or change their existing business. But this is fundamental to the department, that they want to see what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. You don't have to have done it because that involves significant resources and money. I just need you to acknowledge that that's what you're going to do in the future. The other key point to take home is that everything is around about the care recipient. Again, we have a lot of people making applications and it's around their existing business. So for example, if I was a nursing agency at the moment and I'm making an application, I might be tempted to actually say what my existing business is all about at the moment is allocating staff, and we have a time of 23 minutes for the average allocation of staff to a care recipient. That's not what the Department of Health want to hear. The Department of Health want to hear that we have systems in place to allocate staff to meet the needs of the care recipient. So we engage with the care recipient in this way. So it's the same thing, just worded towards the care recipient. The other key point is that we actually think it's really important that you read the necessary bits of the Act. A lot of people look at the Act, they get scared by it, and they avoid reading at it. But the department deliberately target you to specific sections because they want you to respond to those sections. So if there's a section where they ask you to look at the quality of care principles, then it's really important that you actually go and read those quality of care principles and that you relate all of your responses to that section of the Act. So in the application or the guide to the application, they always refer to the related part of the Act. It's a really big tip. You should actually go and read it. So when they're talking about suitability of key personnel and the sanctions principles, you really need to go and read that part of the Act that addresses sanctions. And in that Act it says these are the people that shouldn't be key personnel. And so then you would relate that to your business and say, our policies and procedures about the recruitment of key personnel or the recruitment of staff who will be key personnel says that that key personnel won't have been disqualified under the Corporations Act. But they don't have a criminal history and they're not mentally incapable of performing their role as key personnel. So it's physically going back to that Act and reading about it. It is a really boring document to read and it's really long, but they have made it easier by pinpointing the things that are important to them. The other key point is to use department language. Now, if you're a HAC provider, your terminology is very different to a home care provider. So we want you to actually go through and read the Act or read the standards, the common home care standards, and use the terminology in those common care standards. So the department are really looking for you to call the next of kin of a resident or care recipient or client a representative. So when you're actually talking about next of kin, the department wants you to call them a representative because they want you to understand that this is different. The home care is really different to everything else that's been provided. Now, client is really common to call a client different things, and so the department seem okay about you calling them a resident, client, care recipient, or whatever you want to call them, but for some reason, all the other terminology, they want you to use the same. So when you're talking about key personnel, don't call them executives, call them key personnel, because it means that you're relating things to the Act. It sounds a bit strange, but the department are quite an insular bunch. They know the Act, they know the documents surrounding the Act, and that's all they focus on. So this is also something that you have to focus on. So these are really our key points as you go through your application. It's really about focusing towards the care recipient and towards the department. So we know that your business will not operate like that when you actually get out in the real world, and that's okay. But that's how we as residential care providers and home care providers operate. You know that you have a couple of key stakeholders. That primary key stakeholder is the care recipient, and you're always going to focus your business on that. We also know that the department is a key stakeholder, and you really have to follow the department's rules to get that funding pool. And if you keep directing everything that you do towards those key stakeholders, then everything that comes across in your policies and your procedures will then tick the boxes from an approved provider point of view, but it will also tick all the boxes from CDC point of view, from a common home care standards point of view, and your obligations as approved providers. And we suggest that you change your language, the direction of your business, and all of your processes now towards that, because we know that that's what you have to do once you enter this very complicated and cumbersome realm of approved provider status. Now, I hope I haven't scared you. It is a complicated process, and the application, as I say, is just one part of the process. Getting your business up and running and operating it within the realms of the Act is a completely different ballpark, especially as you move towards a consumer-directed environment. Our biggest recommendation is that you really go out and you learn about the system, you learn from people that are actually delivering care under home care services, and you get the right advisors to actually get in there and actually give you the advice about how your systems are going to be up and running. Do it efficiently though, so don't set up all of your processes until you become approved providers. Just have an understanding of how that would work. So sit down with a whiteboard and go through all of the Act, the home care provisions and the home care standards, and tick off those sections so that you know how they're going to relate to your existing business. And if you do that, that's going to give you a framework of how you're going to run past the approved provider status and then start delivering care in February 2017. So that's about it for me. You're more than welcome to contact Ansell Strategic if you would like advice. AXA also has some great guidance, and they're always your first point of call as well. I hope the session's been informative, and welcome questions.
No, it looks like you covered it all. David, thank you very much for your time. Rosie, any questions from you? You're our sole attendee.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you very much. No, good.
No worries. Thank you again, David. We have recorded this session, so it will be available for access on our members resources site. So thank you. I'll just stop the recording now.
Brilliant.